Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by Mug.News.
This is Nick Kastner, and we are here interviewing Christina Oldfather, one of the builders of Lincoln, Nebraska's ecosystem. Christina, thank you for joining me.
Yes, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, so I'm excited about this twofold. First, this is my very first interview for this podcast. So you are my first episode, so thanks for break the ice, or I guess whatever cliche I'll use. And then secondly, I'm an entrepreneur in Lincoln's ecosystem, so I'm excited to ask you some questions that I have not come up in conversation to this point. So the first being, how did you get involved in Lincoln's startup community?
Yeah, that's a great question, and kind of fell into it, I think, like you do a lot of things. But I was actually working for the State Department of Economic Development, and I had been there for a few years, and I had kind of delved into community development. So I was working with a program called the Nebraska Community Improvement Program, which does no longer exist, but it was a program that really helped small communities across Nebraska, I guess small to mid-size, whatever you want to call it, do kind of strategic planning about their economic development and their growth and their future. And so I was really interested in that. And it was a lot of fun, especially getting to travel across Nebraska and seeing what was happening in all of these communities. So got to see things like other people didn't, like in Potter, Nebraska. I got to go duck pin bowling and have ice cream and all this cool stuff that were kind of hidden gems across the state. So, I worked there. I kind of went around the department into different roles, which was fun just to get to, look at things from different perspectives within the department. So that was kind of the community development side. I moved over to the business development side and started working with the prototype grant program, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, the $50,000 and up-ish grant from the State Department of Economic Development. And so I had the opportunity to really talk more deeply with entrepreneurs about the businesses that they were creating and the ideas that they had, and really started to think about things through that lean startup methodology, and kind of going through applications with entrepreneurs and asking those questions like, have you talked to your customers? What this is a grant, but it's also still an investment. So, what tells me that if we give you this money and you build this thing, that people are going to buy it? And after working with that program for a while, I had the opportunity to talk to the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development. My incredible boss, Pat Haverty, called me and said, hey, we have an opening. And I said, that sounds interesting, but didn't really know, what that would entail necessarily. And so went over and I had a conversation, and I decided to kind of dig down into the local level and really started learning about all the other things that were happening in Lincoln at that time, beyond just the individual entrepreneurs and their ideas, and really took some time to kind of look at the landscape and see where we could come in and help. So kind of came from the state level down to the local level and just dove right in.
Interesting. Yeah. So when did you move over to the startups and entrepreneurial full time? So
I moved over to the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development in 2014, and I had been working with the prototype grant for about a year before that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and it's been cool to see everything to develop in Lincoln's community since then. From someone on the outside, what would be one thing about Lincoln's startup ecosystem that they what's one thing people wouldn't know about Lincoln's community?
That's a really great question. I think one of those things too, where you're like in it and you kind of assume that people see this or they know it because you're in it every day and it seems obvious. But I think probably one of the biggest things and one of the biggest benefits is just the accessibility of people and the resources as well. So, I mean, I know that doesn't happen everywhere, that you can have a conversation with pretty much anybody you want to have a conversation with, that the network and those resources are very open and available to anybody that is interested.
Okay, yeah, I would agree, being someone in the community as well. Yeah. So you touch on the prototype grant, but what are the other like grants or interest-free loans that an entrepreneur is eligible for if they're starting a business in Lincoln?
So, I think there is always, I'll just preface this by saying there is always that myth that there's, a grant for everything. And if you're going to start a business, you can get a grant. There really aren't that many available, but, depending on what you're working on, there are a few, and obviously those equity-free resources are the most ideal, especially when you're just getting started and really going through that validation stage or figuring things out and trying to grow. So, number one is the prototype grant. That's a big one. There's also a grant at the state called the Academic Research and Development Grant. So if you are working on some sort of idea or business that includes any kind of research that you might need help from the university, or you could utilize the university, that can also be a good resource. And then, just like the prototype grant, that does require a match. So sometimes that's where people can run into trouble, as you do have to have some funds in addition to get the funds, just like, anything else. At the local level, we have a program called Launch LNK, which we started a couple of years ago, and it's a $25,000 grant. Does not require a match, and in fact, we've actually had several founders use that as a leverage to match the prototype grant from the state level. And then included with that program is also some free virtual accelerator and coaching services, and some partnerships with an accounting firm, HPE, Klein Williams, for some free legal, and some of those other things that sometimes entrepreneurs should have early on, but are often cost prohibitive, and maybe not the first thing that entrepreneurs are going to spend their money on, nor should they.
Yes, yeah, I'm totally in the same boat of like an accounting system. It's all like pencil and paper and Excel sheets. So that would be one resource that would be very valuable. All right, so Christina, for the next section, I just have some quick hits. And the first one, which coffee shops do entrepreneurs hang out at in Lincoln?
Well, there are several. Probably the main hubs would be the Mill and the Haymarket, and Crescent Moon. Also a big fan of Crescent Moon. I think Crescent Moon is one of those places where you think you're going to go like kind of hide from people, but really that is also another place where everybody goes and you run into everybody, which is great.
Yes. Yeah.
I would also add the Mill Innovation Campus to that list as well. It's really a nice spot, and another one of those where you think maybe you're going a little bit out of the way because you're not in the Haymarket, but yeah, you run into everybody there as well. Absolutely.
And the Mill on Innovation, they also serve beer. So it's also a good place to go at 3:30 or 4 on a Friday.
Yeah. Or just hang out all day.
Yes. Exactly. So next, are there any co-working spaces in Lincoln?
Yeah, there are quite a few spaces, and there's definitely options depending on what you're looking for. So Fuse Co-working, down in the Haymarket, home of the NMotion Accelerator, and also just kind of in, the middle of all that activity in the Haymarket is a good spot for the hot desk option, where you have that lower monthly membership and you can just drop in and grab a desk. They also have some office spaces. There's Turbine Flats, which is another great space over kind of on the east side of campus. And they've just built a really amazing community there. Have a coffee shop in the building, which is cool, and some drop-in co-working, but a lot of really affordable office space too. And then Innovation Campus as well does have some hot desk space and some spaces for people that are just starting out to connect with everything going on out there too.
So if I were new to Lincoln's community and I wanted to learn more about startup events, what resource would I go to find out that information?
Yeah, so I would say there's two kind of pockets of that. So one would be if you're new and you're kind of searching around virtually, which we're all doing a lot of that right now. There's a digital platform called Startup LNK. It's curated content with all the events that are going on from a variety of different places in Lincoln. A calendar that you can actually plug into your own calendar, so you never miss anything that you want to attend with people that you want to meet. When we get back to more in-person things, definitely just drop into some of those coffee shops and the co-working spaces is a really great way to meet people, find out what's going on, and figure out where you can get plugged in.
Yes, absolutely. The newsletter for the Launch LNK is a solid resource for that exact thing. I'm just like the weekly update. Yes,
yeah, definitely. You can get the calendar basically delivered to your inbox with that.
Totally. So what is the most successful startup from Lincoln, in your opinion?
Ooh, well, I can't pick favorites.
Of course.
I'll start with that. But, if you look at all of the companies that we've kind of helped with the Launch LNK program, with the NMotion Accelerator, there's just a lot of success that we've seen come out of that. So, I guess kind of looking initially at NMotion, you've got Quantified Ag that just had an exit. You've got, oh my gosh, of course I draw complete blanks on the rest of the NMotion companies right now. The Launch LNK side of things, you've got Basic Block that, we funded in kind of our first round and went on to raise a lot of money, and they're still growing. Sapon, which is also another NMotion company and a Launch LNK company, continuing to grow and pivot and doing a lot of things to even kind of grab the moment and making, masks in addition to their bags and helping people here and in Thailand. We've just seen a lot of growth, and there's just so many things that people can take advantage of. I feel like I should literally talk about every company we have, but I can't. So I guess there's that.
And your answer to this one might be similar, but who's the most known entrepreneur from Lincoln?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think, if you look at kind of our different stages of entrepreneurship, so, we like to look at it in, idea to validation to scale to growth. A lot of those entrepreneurs that started kind of in that initial 2012 timeframe, like almost right before NMotion got started, before a lot of the things were put into place, are the ones that really are inspirational and people look up to. And I guess, some of the people that come to mind are, Paul Jarrett with Bulu, Paul and Stephanie, Blake and Audie with Open Doors, Jay Wilkinson with Firespring, Matthew Wagner, some of these people that kind of were at the cut, growing their companies while the startup ecosystem itself was really just burgeoning, or maybe even quite a bit before it. And so the cool thing is there are also really great resources, going back to that idea that, you can really email or call anybody in this community and they will answer. They're willing to do that with people, which is awesome.
Yes. Yeah. And almost everyone on that, everyone you just listed has, put a bunch of effort into giving back to the community. Yes, each of those I have some relationship with, and they're willing to give advice and feedback, which is just cool to see, the first wave of entrepreneurs helping the next one. Who is the biggest venture capital, who is the biggest venture capitalist you've worked with in Lincoln?
Another great question. So I guess the first one that always comes to mind is Invest Nebraska. They are always there as really great partner in a lot of the things that we do, make a lot of really great referrals through this ecosystem, which that's, one of the biggest components of a vibrant ecosystem is that network and the resources. So, for instance, this latest iteration of EnMotion with the Accelerator Studio, they have, provided, again, some of those matching investment funds to be able to make this program happen. The other thing I think that we've got as a really great resource here is the Nebraska Angels, which, of course, is more of a network, not necessarily a fund. But then our corporate investors too. So Nelnet's always at the table. We've had some great partnerships arise out of this Accelerator Studio with Nelnet, Union Bank, Emeritus, Assurity. A lot of people, really coming to the table to help grow the community.
Are there any news outlets, podcasts, or blogs dedicated to covering startups in Lincoln?
So probably I would say not Lincoln specific, but the Silicon Prairie News, of course, is a big supporter of our community and cover a lot of the things that happen here in Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Probably they're the most top of mind, I would say.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And they've been around since that first wave of entrepreneurs in the area, like by 2013 that we kind of discussed with Paul, Jarrett, and Blake. They rose from there, and they're still hanging in there. So then, last question for you, Christina: if I were to move to the community tomorrow and wanted to start a business, what should be the first thing I do? So
the first thing you should do would probably be to, like right now, I would say you should apply for the EnMotion Accelerator Studio, especially if you don't have an idea, because we are building startups from scratch and making investments in those ideas. So that would probably be number one. Number two, even though you didn't ask for number two, you should definitely check out the Startup LNK newsletter and website, and then attend every event that you see on there to connect with all the different resources, from the people to organizations to programs and everything in between.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, that is everything I had for you, Christina. Thank you so much for hopping on Zoom with me this morning and kind of nerding out about Lincoln's ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Always happy to nerd out about the ecosystem.
Well, thanks again.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from the person building it, I'm going to link back up with Caitlin to clarify some jargon and take a deeper dive into this community.
All right. Hi, Nick. How was your interview with Christina?
It was wonderful. So I have like a personal relationship with Christina. I've known her for a couple years now. So it was great to, I guess, ask her more like questions that don't come up in conversation, and just touch base with her on a more like, I wouldn't have asked these type of questions when I, meet her at a startup event. And it was also great to just reconnect with someone from your community. That the one thing that COVID has, I guess the biggest complaint about COVID is the lack of community, and that we're all missing like seeing our friends and seeing people we know. So it was nice to reconnect with Christina. That at the end, it was before we started recording. I said to her, I was like, I haven't seen you in like, I think over a year. And she was the person that I would run into all the time at the coffee shops and at events and all that stuff. So it was wonderful chatting with her.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about your takeaways. I'd love to hear one.
Yes, of course. So I am, I live in Omaha, Nebraska, but my girlfriend lives in Lincoln, and I went to school in Lincoln, and I worked at a first startup in Lincoln. So I'm very familiar with like the Lincoln scene, and it was, it I guess is a good reminder to reflect is probably the right word, but to get a sense of all the work that led to the success that is currently taking place in Lincoln. And just hearing Christina talk about like that they started working on this ecosystem like a decade ago, and there are very notable like success stories from Huddle, which is a software service for sporting teams internationally. and Company Cam, and all the ones that Christina touched on. That like you look at those, and then it's like, I guess I don't always appreciate when you see like the giant building with the logo on it, that success story really started even well before the founders met each other. That there is a lot that goes into it, and people have been working on it for a very long time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point that you bring up on perspective. I think I definitely agree. I mean, I can think of things off the hand that I didn't even think about appreciating while you are in the space, but no, that's great. Did you have any like jargon or things you looked up after your interview?
Yeah, so because I'm so familiar with like what she was talking about, that I knew like all the coffee shops she mentioned, and like even when she would like kind of get name dropped, it was like, oh, I know, like I've met him too. Like I know that I have a relationship with him too. So not really. It did make me in my other podcast that I host called The Commonwealth, I interviewed the founders of Huddle, which it was. To me, that they're like the most successful entrepreneurs out of Lincoln, and they were not the first on Christina's list. So it was kind of interesting to hear. Like my favorite coffee shop was not Christina's favorite coffee shop, and I didn't want to throw shade in the interview because we can go to different places. But
right.
Yes, but I actually found that I went back to that original interview with the Huddle founders. To hear them talk about what the startup scene in Lincoln was like in 2005 when they were starting their company, and then contrast that to what it is today. That's
so cool to hear. Did you have any other takeaways or any final parting thoughts?
Not really. That was it. So Caitlin, do you want to read us out?
I'd love to. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder podcast, which is a product of Mug.News and hosted by Nick Kastner and Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, contact us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every Wednesday morning, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a beat.